and he owned a business, and now his mom's running it. That's supposed to be retired. So that was an unplanned exit with no plan at all. And the estate planning, the execution of that is just a nightmare.
Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, as always, Christian D. Evans. Build your dynasty. How the heck do you do that? Most of you guys that are listening are going out there and building incredible businesses, but you don't want to get to the end of your life and then all of a sudden lose it by taxes and estate, situations and probate and all that fun stuff, right? That nobody really tells you until you die and you're like, oh crap, what happened? Well, that's the reason why I have this next guest on. She is the CEO of Dynasty Family Office in Columbus, Ohio. She and her mission is to help educate over 10,000 family businesses running at about a million to $30 million top line to gain more control over their personal and professional lives, leveraging a lot of her wealth management tools. She's a TEDx speaker, she's a trainer, as well as many speaking engagements. Please welcome my guest, Molly Grubb. How are you doing today, Molly?
Hey, I'm doing amazing now that I'm with you, Christian.
Well, I am looking forward to this amazing conversation. And before we dive into it, you actually mentioned and I want to start with this because I'm going to link the TEDx talk that you shared, but in that TEDx talk, you shared an incredible story. And that was the pivotal moment that led you into the path that you are in now and the value that you bring. I want to ask, would you share that story with our audience, Molly?
Of course. Well, I'm the runt of 6 kids. So you can imagine the turmoil that I was born into. But to make it worse, my youngest sister, Mandy, at the young age of 2, just when I was born, she was diagnosed with a really rare blood disorder with only 1 in a million chances of being able to even survive that disease. And so, of course, my dad, being a Mason, he worked 40 hours a week at his union job and would come home and straggle my 3 boys into his evening jobs at night and basically racking up another 30 hours just to make ends meet. And this went on for 4 years. Us girls would ride in the van to an hour to Children's Hospital and just hope that Mandy wouldn't bleed out on the way, while my father and brothers would try to just make ends meet. And we were barely making it. So you can imagine when the day finally came where the doctors came into the office. I was sitting on my mom's lap and the doctor just said, this is it. I just felt my mom's tears just drip into my pigtails. And I looked up at my dad and just saw complete devastation on his face. I didn't know what this word meant. What is this is it? I was confused and I was scared. But my mom, being absolutely beyond faithful and relentless, prayed for that miracle with over 1,000 people that evening in our church. And, the next time we went to the doctor's office, 2 weeks later, the doctor came in and they said, Mr. and Mrs. Green, we've tried every possible solution. Blood transfusions, we went a little crazy on the prednisone, which turned her bones to powder. We did everything that we knew to do. And it was never enough. But she's healed. It's a complete miracle. We don't know what happened. But sometimes in life, when you have a miracle like that happen, you need another one. Because you see the 4 years of just laying it all out on the table to make sure Mandy can have every opportunity to make it. The insurance company decided to default on us, and we will lose what little we had left. Our home, our car. A local news channel picked up our story, and the night that it aired, a local business owner was so touched by it that he went to the sheriff auction and bought that house back for us. He then drove in a brand new blue minivan stuffed with 3 Minnie Mouses for us girls and 3 Mickey Mouses for my brothers. And as he handed the keys to my dad, he said, we're going to Disney World in my private jet. That is what we do. We help people be like Bill. So their story isn't our story doesn't become theirs, but also to be able to bless others from their dynasty that they built.
I appreciate you sharing that. And when you look and imagine that young Molly in that experience, when you're helping your clients, achieve those results and build out that foundation of the dynasty wealth, and there's a lot of questions that have to go into it. What do you find is something that a lot of these business owners come to you with, as in like, hey, I don't know exactly how to allocate this to my children, or having those tough conversations? What does that look like, Molly?
Well, unfortunately, the majority of most business owners are the do-it-allers, right? They are running their business. They're also employees of their business. They're also the CFOs of their personal life and COOs of their personal life. And it's quite chaotic. So before we even really roll up our sleeves with them, it's about gaining absolute clarity on what it is that they want their money to achieve. What does it mean to them and their family? What are the things they love to do? What is their current process? Who is their current team? Most of the time, they don't even have a CPA or any go-to individuals. And a lot of times we have to have that hard conversation, because most professionals, unfortunately, are not trained to work with small business owners. As I was stating with you before we got on this meeting, that 99% of small businesses or 99% of all businesses are considered small. But yet when you go to get your master's in business administration, let's call it, or business management, they're teaching you on how to manage and support the 1%, the large, the mid-sized companies. And so it leaves the majority of business owners that we work with kind of in a tough situation, because they're not getting the right advice, and someone that has also potentially experienced their pain points and have gone through their pain. So it's just more, they need somebody that can help them think outside the box. So that's one of the major components that we help these business owners do, is build a team of advisors, a board for their personal life, that help them think outside the box. Because, for example, I was working with a client the other day where if they did not figure out how to remove $300,000 from their bottom line that by year end, it was going to cost them about $160,000 in taxes. That's a big wealth difference for someone that is worth about $3 to $4 million. And so it's being able to have that impact and be able to extract that wealth from their business to not only help their taxes, help them have greater loyalty with their employees, but also be able to set aside some of that money for their family and themselves, where their entire assets is not the business.
Well, one of the things I saw on your website when I was kind of, preparing for this interview is you mentioned simplicity. And I thought that was such a really awesome approach, because, I've talked to some individuals that are high net worth and ultra high net worth, and they're in that, 8, 9 figure, and they do very well for themselves. But it's like they're calling like 1,000 people. They call it their insurance guy. They got their wealth manager. They got their CFO, and it's just like, wow, but they're, one of the things you mentioned is that you try to keep it simple, where it's like that one call. It's like, hey, we can basically build that out and simplify your life, so then you can focus on whatever you want to do, your kids, your family, missions, charity, whatever it is. Where did that come from? Was that always a thesis of yours, or was that kind of an evolution for your firm?
Well, I believe businesses are just an embellishment of what's in your soul, and I'm a recovering actuary, so I naturally want to make things more complicated. That's just how I am. If it's easy, it can't be that easy, right? So I wish I could steal Staples branding and just have like the little easy button, because that's what I try to always achieve, is how can I make this simpler, because I'm just naturally going to make it more complicated. And so we've even designed out a whole portal internally when we start working with clients. So literally everything is just on one page, the 30,000 foot view all the way down to the 1 foot view. So they can see their entire advanced plan, everything about their life, and all the way down to what's in this account, or what's our next strategy to get to this step. And it took a lot of effort to get it to that clarity. But when you have that clarity and you can see everything, just in that alone helps people to be able to have the peace of mind and confidence that they are going to make the best and right decision, and they know the next step, and it's a whole evolution. They can see how it progresses over time, so they can go back from day one to year 3 to year 5 to see how everything has been progressing for them.
What do you think? Because you work with some companies that are a million to 30 million, right? A lot of the CEOs and those founders. And at what point do you think that they should be kind of becoming aware of having these conversations, right? Taking the proper distribution, making sure that they've got things allocated accordingly. Because I know a lot of our listeners, they're at, 5 to 7, $8 million top line, right? They run a, pretty successful business. They listen to this podcast because they want to scale to 8 and 9 figure naturally. And Molly, what do you find are some of the hurdles, whether it's the mindset, whether it's just like not becoming aware of it, like they don't even realize that they should be doing certain things or certain activities at this stage at their business?
And we don't know, but to simplify it, the one thing I question you should ask yourself is, who is calling me right now and telling me what my next step should be? Do you have that person in your life that is giving you actual active management, whether it be on your taxes, your legal, any of that? Who is doing that for you right now? Because if you are that person and you're also trying to run the business and do all this, then you're going to end up like my family when they found their success years later, and to the point where they were bought out by competition. They were using the people they knew rather than the experts they needed. They treated it like a transaction rather than a process. They'd never done this before, right? And so they lost, unfortunately, everything, their home, their car, all of that. So having someone that is that head coach trying to be 10 steps ahead of you, if it's just one person, if you can have more than that, even better. But to answer your question, how do I know to ask the questions that I don't know? Well, that would be the basic rule of thumb that I would state. You can't see the forest through the trees. An attorney should never represent themselves. All that same rhetoric. Having that person that's always going to be looking out for you and is actively wanting to meet with you on a regular basis to look out for those traps.
Molly, you say something very powerful there, and I want to reiterate that footstop on that, because you like a lot of individuals, we just know relationships, right? And so I've always been, I've always had this financial advisor, et cetera, right? Well, there is a difference between just an advisor and a wealth manager, right? Someone that's actually preserving and growing your wealth at that level. And what I find interesting is also something that I've, like you mentioned, it's like if you have a team that got you to 8 figures, that same team won't be able to help you get to 9 figures and $1 billion valuation, right? In your company. It's just the same structure that you have with your wealth, right? It's like, hey, you got you here. Cool. Maybe you need someone like Molly's able to help you get to the next level, and more complicated vehicles that these individuals may or may not be aware of, and be able to make sure, like you said, you're not like your family where all of a sudden, hey, they lost that, and sadly that was that situation. I want to ask a little bit about when you're looking at your advanced plan. You actually go a little bit more in detail about, like, there's certain pillars: wealth enhancement, wealth transfer, wealth protection, charitable planning. Help us unpack those a little bit for our audience.
Well, so when you're picking out your advisors, for example, you want to be very clear on who your predator and who are predators and who are just the pretenders. And I point that out because less than 7% of people that say they do wealth management are actually doing it. And the true definition of advanced planning of wealth management is investment consulting. Some do it better than others. And you have advanced planning, and then you have to have that relationship manager in there to make sure it all happens. So wealth enhancement is just working with your cash flow. What are some things that we can tweak to increase that? Mitigate against taxes, identify 4 to 5 additional streams of income, just like we did for the largest dance studio here in Ohio. Just by doing some space design on her current property, we were able to identify how she can add 10% net profit, that alone. So a lot of times it has nothing to do with investments. It's just helping them rethink their business, right? And then wealth transfer, that's just making sure that Uncle Sam isn't going to take a disproportionate share at the time of passing. Everything's clean, it's going to avoid probate, and the right people get the money that you want to have during that transfer. And wealth protection is that inevitable torpedo that's going to blow up your financial ship. I know I've gone through a divorce. It cost me a lot of money. But I was able to save another client $600,000 just through his separation of his ex, because I was able to align him with the right attorney that identified that issue. And then charitable giving, we find that 30 to 40% of people as successful as yourself, your audience on here, that they want to be able to give back to the community. But why not be able to give back to the community in a way that helps their bottom line, or helps maybe them be able to give even more?
So, and I appreciate you talking a little bit about that case study, because you guys come in not just as like, hey, look at these other vehicles that we can establish and put your money in, but you also come in as like a consultant for these businesses to optimize their margins. To definitely with this situation that's going on, the economy, et cetera. Molly, could you just share maybe a few other case studies that you've been able to, as your wealth manager firm has been able to come alongside these companies and these business owners, and not just like leverage a lot of these other vehicles, wealth vehicles, but also just saying, hey, this is what we're looking at your business. This is how we can optimize, and like you said, fortify to ensure that you are protected during this crazy market time.
Yeah. So one of the easiest low-hanging fruit that I always see with almost any business that we take on is the fact that they are under the belief system they can only put that $24,000 or $27,000 away in their 401k. They're essentially throwing away potential loyalty from their employees, but they're also throwing away a lot of potential ways to avoid, or not avoid, but mitigate against their taxes. So for example, we just did a case study on a client, and we were able to allow them, we were able to create a plan that put a $350,000 away a year in just their retirement plan themselves. And it saved about $100,000 on their taxes. Yeah, they had to pay a little bit extra to employees, but their net, the plan paid for itself. And then also allow them to ease into QBI and a couple other things. So the tax impact was much greater than what just the 1-to-1 ratio. As far as another example, we specialize in helping people use their largest asset in their business, which tends to be real estate, and be able to have that be an additional vehicle of income without it creating a tax event. So some examples of this is a lot of times when people exit their business, they're also the largest thing that's going to support that exit is the real estate. And Uncle Sam thinks he's your partner today, tomorrow, and especially when you're selling a business. So we help people create those tax-free or very low tax exits. And one way is by using the real estate, by utilizing that 1031 exchange. But then a lot of clients, they're not real estate investors. They don't want to go find another piece of real estate, especially in today's market where a debt service is 2 or 3 times what it was last year. So we do have a vehicle that we help clients be able to retire that and create a passive income without having to pay taxes today. And as long as they keep holding that type of real estate or that type of property through the 1031 exchange, then they never have to pay taxes, because it'll just go to their heirs and they get a step up in cost basis. So those are just a couple things additional without nerding out too much. But yeah, it's we retired for an architect $450,000 of his property, and he's just been getting a nice income stream over the last 7-8 years from that, of about 6-7% net. And we just did a additional 1031 to rinse and repeat the process. And he realized another 25% gain on that since he owned it. And this is just mailbox money. He does nothing for it. So, but I won't bore you guys with the details on that. Just make sure to go to dfo.com/journey. Again, that's Dynasty Family Office, dfo.com/journey. And you can reach out to us directly there.
Awesome. And guys, those links are in the description. So make sure you stop what you're doing and literally just go reach out. And because she's got all this content out there, that's her website, dfo.com. Now, I want to ask you a little bit further because what I found so interesting is when you're in that high level, right? We're talking about really, decreasing that tax bill at the end of the day. And just to share, I've shared this on the with my audience before, but just kind of give a little context. I had an exit in 2021, and I did it totally not properly. Let me just share with you that I got a tax bill. It was not, because I was not consulting with wealth managers and whatever. It was emotional time with the divorce, et cetera. But my point is that there was a good learning experience. And so, Molly, I want to ask two questions. One is at that level, $1 million to $30 million. You want to make sure, I love the word you said, fortify your business. We can't anticipate health issues. We can't anticipate accidents that happen. When you're the CEO and you're running at that kind of level, a lot of times you're still wearing a lot of hats as the founder. And so how do you fortify, whether that's leveraging insurance, whether that's leveraging just, kind of like a succession plan, et cetera, having those conversations with people like yourself, as well as their wealth manager, to say, hey, this is what this looks like. I know this is kind of getting off the wealth management, but this is a good strategic approach to fortify that business for future generations, and ensure that it's still working without you being there. And, so what is your perspective on that, Molly?
Well, I am a certified business exit consultant intentionally because I saw what my family went through, and I'm like, I don't know if I ever want to, I don't want this to happen under my watch. So, you want to have, yes, insurance is an excellent vehicle to protect for essentially pennies on the dollar for a risk that all of us have 100% chance of having, and that's dying. But while we're running our business, the greater chance that most people don't underwrite for or assume is you becoming disabled. It's greater than you actually dying while you're running your business. I know it sounds backwards. So just make sure when you're kind of thinking through some of your risk, has that discussion been thought of, talked about, and planned for? So there are two different exits. There's the 911 exit, and there's the actual planned exit. We never know when we're going to have that stroke and inevitably not be able to operate or function or maybe even be here. If I've seen this happen more often than not. I had actually a client lose himself and his entire family because he due to carbon monoxide, and he owned a business and now his mom's running it that's supposed to be retired. So that was an unplanned exit with no plan at all, and the estate planning, the execution of that is just a nightmare. So to consolidate it, those are the two things that we want to look at: is who gets it right now if the inevitable bus hits you, versus I want to grow and have this multiple to get to this point, and this is when I want to exit. But it also can be a transition too. So for example, I've sold my firm twice because I knew I needed to niche down to just working with business owners. So it took a phase for me. So sometimes it might be you taking some pieces or some bites of that apple to be able to niche down or grow further. Or maybe you just want to phase into retirement and gradually give it to the next people in line to inherit that business. But all done with mitigating against taxes. I mean, some easy stuff that you can do is, Delaware Statutory Trust, Opportunity Zones, Popeyes, ESOPs, any of those super fancy names. And I know your Robbie, I think I was listening to him, don't use those buzzwords. So, but when you work with us, we'll melt it down when I'm speaking with you, that these are really simple and can be simple transitions to just mitigate against your taxes. They do exist, but I just wanted to throw out some quick jargon to let you know there are options. Feel free to look it up or just reach out to us there at dfo.com.
And Molly brings up a good point. If you don't know what those stand for, the little like lingo and the jargon that she mentioned, then that is definitely a cue that you probably need to talk with Molly and her team, because that is something that obviously you need to have that conversation and dialogue at the end of the day. And I want to ask you a little bit on I love what you said, 911 exit versus planned exit. And that's one of the reasons why I want to bring this up, because I think, I've heard stories, very, very sad stories, 40-year-old guy running a high 8-figure business, and, just all of a sudden collapse, and now the wife has to take over, and she's, just not anticipating that. Nobody anticipates that. And so you need to make sure that you fortify and anticipate that, of course, and have that succession. So I appreciate you sharing that. What do you when you're having these conversations, I want to ask you a little bit about alternative investing. I know there are different opportunities in different vehicles. You mentioned real estate as one. I've heard a lot of like private equity. I've heard, obviously natural gas. There are other opportunity zones that will also help facilitate, um, destroying that tax bill at the end of the year. What is your perspective on that? Is that kind of a last approach after everything else is maxed out, and then we start looking at that as another thesis, or is that kind of sprinkled in, or is it very contextual? I'd love to get your response.
For us, it's fluid, but we enter that conversation with the caution that all the alternative investments, majority of the time, are very illiquid. And so we want to go into that space cautiously and not have too much in it, and make sure that there's a clear understanding on that turnaround of when the client may need to have that money back, or is it just cash flow? For example, one of the vehicles that we use when we help people retire their real estate without having to pay taxes, that's illiquid, but they get good cash flow, and all they're really interested is in that income without having to pay a lot of taxes for it. So we're open to all those conversations, but we're more open to it when there's a tax advantage, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've heard that numerous times. I was talking to, I believe, a certified financial strategist, I believe was her acronym. Anyways, and she was explaining how that, she was leveraging a lot of their resources in regards to opportunity zones to, decrease that tax bill at the end. So I just want to get your perspective on it. It's very contextual. I've noticed the industry has moved from that like 60-40 split now to a portion of it going to some sort of alternative investing. Like most people are very familiar with the real estate as an alternative investing strategy, just because that turns 1031 exchange, because it also depreciation, et cetera. What other things do you find that are like vehicles that these high net worth individuals are not utilizing? I know you mentioned just like ESOP, things like that, but what other things, instruments do you realize that these individuals are not aware of?
So the plan I was referring to earlier is called the FBO plan, a focused benefit option plan. So that allows someone to go in, and basically it's a 4-layered cake is how I like to describe it. You have your 401k, you have a cash balance plan, plus then you layer that with a profit sharing plan. And then to put gasoline on it, you put life insurance, and it's all in this pre-tax vehicle for the client. So they can really magnify based on their age and their income, how much they can contribute. I have a client that's he's super young. He's only able to do about $150,000 into it. But then I have clients that are doing $350,000, $400,000 into it, for example. Oil, I like the energy space because you get that really quick, fast depreciation day one. And then, of course, those that do own their real estate, you should always relook and see how long you're going to own it and how long you have owned it, because there are probably some hidden pockets of depreciation you can accelerate to just in today. So a cost segregation study allows you to accelerate your depreciation on everything but the brick and mortar of your building. So the lights have a shorter life cycle. The flooring has a shorter life cycle than the brick and the walls around that's create the structure of the building. So you can accelerate that. And for example, I have a client, they did a $3.5 million build out, and they're able to get, I think, about $350,000 of that acceleration today. Now, you could just wait and just streamline that out over that normal amortization schedule, but what it allows you to do is the time value of money. Is that $350,000 worth more to you today than 10 years from now? Most will agree that the 350 to them is more advantageous to take now. So there's some other considerations, but as far as just pulling out, just using the tax game, those are a few additional options that they can take a peek at.
Well, see, that's what I think is so interesting about these vehicles, Molly, is like what you just mentioned contextually, you have to explain it to them, right? It's like, hey, you know what, these vehicles, and then obviously push that out in the time scale and saying, hey, this is the benefit of doing this XYZ. And obviously you see that kind of larger scale, what that is. And I'm curious, I want to get into a little bit of psychology, okay? Because why do you think, I think a lot of individuals, it's like one of those things, it's like there's a ton of knowledge out there, but for some reason we don't do what we need to do, right? And why, what prevents us? Just for those that are listening, many of us are probably sitting there like, okay, cool, maybe I've already got a wealth manager. Oh, cool, I'm already smart enough, I already know, I've got things already set, right? There's certain biases or certain things that are assumptions, presuppositions. And Molly, I just want to get your perspective on the psychology of it and say, hey, maybe us as business owners, we should be aware, humble ourselves, and we may not know everything that we know about this, and how to prevent our own failure of being in our own way and the lack of knowledge in this. Well, on a psychological perspective, what is your opinion on that? And maybe just share some red flags that our audience should be aware of when they're thinking about these things.
Sure. Let's get into these fun conversations that it seems like fluff, but really can be the difference between your success or your failure. So what I like to narrow it down to is just our belief circles. We all have them of what we believe our world needs to be like. And as a result, that's what the world looks like. The people that are in your life today, and that are the funds that you have, the success or lack thereof that you have, all have everything to do with your belief circles. So I was raised super religious, very controlled, you name it. So I thought I had to be a follower. And it only took me we'll go back to journaling, as basic as that is, to understand that whatever I wrote down is what my world was. So my motto for this year is I'm a fierce women leader and I am a champion. And that's what's coming into my life, because our subconscious mind is so much more powerful than our conscious mind. So if we can write it down, the rest of our being will work everything with that intention to make that happen. So if we want to go back to the miracle of my sister, for example, we had 1,000 people praying for Mandy. Now you can, say check out because you're religious or not, but just think about the psychology of it. Everyone was putting their energy to Mandy's healing. And as a result, she was healed. You can say it was God, you can say whatever it was, but just think about the psychology of that. So if you start writing down what you want, and I like to, when I'm ever stuck somewhere, I like to put in my Dynasty journal, I just give myself permission to just write down all my shit. Everything that just is absolutely false, absolutely wrong. We just did an all-house remodel, got completely screwed by the first contractor, and I thought all hell was going in a handbasket. I knew that wasn't true. I knew it was completely false, but I allowed and gave myself permission just to put all that down, because it was just a broken record and I wasn't able to move forward. I couldn't focus on the business. I couldn't do anything. So then once I did that, I reread my lies that I was telling myself, and then wrote down in a very simple one sentence what I wanted my truth to be, that it was going to be a beautiful house that we can entertain and have memories. And that's what we have. We got a disco ball, and we've had multiple dance parties with 60, 70 people making this house bounce. So, it's the power of being able to have that. If you want something even better, then we just need to write that down. That's part of the first things that we do, even in our first initial meeting, is we force our clients to tell us the true meaning of money and where they want it to be and what it is they want out of life. So we at least write it down for them. So it's a constant reminder at each and every meeting, what all this crazy, why we are doing it, and to stay focused.
Yeah, and I really appreciate unpacking that, because one of the reasons why I'm just always confused with this is like, it doesn't matter how many times you could say that, and share, hey, you know what, you need to have to avoid probate, you need to have all these plans, you need to have a wealth manager, you need to have someone to come alongside you and share this stuff. But for some reason, we don't actually pursue that until all of a sudden everything is going to hell in a hay basket, like that 911 exit, right? Oh crap, right? Oh, I passed away. Oh crap, right? And the reality is, it's a hindsight 2020, and that's why I think it's so important for thousands upon thousands of listeners that will be listening to this podcast. Very few will reach out, sadly. And what I'm trying to figure out is, like, psychologically, why is that? Is it just a bias that, oh wow, a lot of business owners think, well, I'll take care of it later. That's not on fire right now, right? It's not the end of the world. But the reality is, it actually is. Because if something happens, correct me if I'm wrong, but if your offense is only as good as your defense. And psychologically, why do you think a lot of individuals just don't pursue that and asking these? Is it also maybe psychologically, like they're afraid to actually show someone like yourself all their wealth or what they've been able to establish? Or maybe they're not even familiar with, I don't even know where the hell I'm spending all this money. Like, the money's going everywhere and they have no idea what at the end of the day, what it is. What do you find are like some of the big things that a lot of these individuals are psychologically working with? Because some of these are, first time founders, and they're making top line a lot of money. And what does that look like?
Well, I'll be honest. We are, I think, on the same equivalence of someone wanting to go see a dentist, right? Because when they come to see us, they're getting completely naked financially. And that can be really embarrassing. What if, your relationship with your spouse isn't fantastic? Or what if you made a mistake over here? You don't even want to admit to yourself that you shouldn't have partnered with this individual, or you made this mistake, or maybe you're admitting that you're not where you want to be yet. And so you're embarrassed to admit that to someone in confidence, that I want to be here, but I'm only here and all my colleagues are way above here, right? So it can be very intimidating and nerve-wracking. And you just want to have that person to say, it's going to be okay. And we're going to get there. And what you're doing right now is already pretty amazing. And we help cultivate that. But I think a lot of that is just what I just said. I mean, who wants to, get in front of a stage and think of everyone in their underwear, right? That's what you're supposed to do when you're speaking. Well, the same thing happens, when you're talking about your finances and completely opening up, because we do look at absolutely every little corner of your financial house, even not outside even beyond the financial house, because let's be honest, money is just the result of what your real passion and everything that you're trying to achieve in life is about. So don't ever lead with it. It's just the result. This is a journey to building your dynasty. And a dynasty is that legacy that you're living and want to leave behind for others, whether it be emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of those components of everything that you are. So for example, I lead my life. I don't try to tell other people how to live. If you want to know how I think you should live, look at what I'm doing, but I won't tell you how you should live your life. And so being able to write that down on paper and have that family motto for your family to, work towards and be a part of that greater good. It's big steps, but it can be very intimidating. And I think that's why it's just better if it's in the background and I'll deal with it tomorrow, right?
Yeah, you mentioned some really good, and I love that. Nobody wants to go to the dentist, but you have to, and then also financially make it. This is how I was in a situation the same way, where it's like, oh, once I achieve this, then I will go to a wealth manager, right? And the reality is, like, well, what if I just went to the wealth manager? The way I look at it is, having a conversation with a wealth manager, I'm able to collapse the time frame and avoid pitfalls. And that's the way I reframe it in my head. It's like, yeah, it sucks to have these conversations because I don't have all my shit in order. But by doing that, then having that conversation, being authentic and being vulnerable with someone like yourself, it's like, oh, this makes more sense. And now I can actually hit that goal a lot faster, a lot quicker, because you have the expertise and experience. How do you reframe it for those that are listening? that like are just afraid of being financially naked. I love the way you said that, financially naked. For those that do fear that, like, oh, I don't really know where my money's going. I have no idea. I just keep spending everything, my personal finance and my business finance. And I've seen people that, they're running pretty decent size, and it's all convoluted. They don't really have anything simple because they're just focused on selling and building and scaling a business, which is, I understand. So for those that, how would you help them reframe it to say, hey, you need to reach out to Molly because of this, and don't be afraid of being financially naked?
Well, none of us get out of this life unscathed. We all go through shit. I've gone through shit. We used to call our family team the chaos patrollers, because 4 years ago, my sister was diagnosed with leukemia. I was going through my divorce. My mom passed away at the same time. I donated my stem cell to my sister so she could be cancer free. There was a lot going on. And do you think I was probably the most stable individual at that point in time? No. So we all go through stuff. So I say that because that pain was super unique to me, but it wasn't unique to the world. Because again, we all go through that crazy. I mean, the whole world went through crazy 2 years ago with COVID. So, so just understand and box that in, that, yeah, your pain might be unique to you, but it's something that we work with. And I've been a part of personally, each and every day for our clients. I don't know how many times I get those phone calls. Should I make this purchase? I'm scared of this, and this. Molly, can you help me rethink this? How can I retrain essentially my negative brain to accept this opportunity that's right in front of me, but I'm just mentally blocked and I can't do it? So it can be just this, but it's just making yourself, the more we can make ourselves vulnerable, I think the more success we can have, because it's going to mitigate against our risk.
Yeah, I appreciate you just kind of emphasizing that. And the reason why I always love to talk about psychology is, at the end of the day, I've talked to some individuals that are high net worth, ultra high net worth, and they still struggle with these things in their head. And I've talked to some individuals that are just hitting that first, $1 million, $3 million, $5 million top line business. And it's like, okay, cool, that's awesome. And it's just, it's having that, being authentic and being vulnerable. And the reality is just, you don't know what you don't know. This is new territory for everybody as you keep growing, as you keep scaling, and having people like like yourself and your team, Molly, to come alongside these individuals, our listeners, and be able to guide them and be able to avoid those consequences and those tax IRS or whatever the situation may be. Molly, I really appreciate being on here and sharing, your story, what you had to go through, but that was the backboard that helps you become the person you are now, and the resiliency that you've shown, and just the incredible information of going from the 911 exit to the planned exit, and actually how to build that, and then also the psychology behind it, how to reframe that in our head. And so for those that are listening, we make sure that, hey, if you don't have this, or if there's like one iota thing that you do not have, and what Molly mentioned, you need to reach out. So Molly, for those that do want to reach out, have a conversation, and want to get access to advanced planning that we can unpack today, how do they do that?
Wow, as I mentioned earlier, you go to dfo.com /journey, which will also have this podcast right on there. And then we'll also have give you access to our little book that is going to support our big book when we launch it, Build Your Dynasty. And it's really just kind of the foundation of our entire process that we mentioned today. So we'll make that available also to your audience.
Awesome, guys. Those links will be in the description below. That is DFO, dynastyfamilyoffice.com. And I want to let you guys know that I will also put her LinkedIn, her TEDx talk down there as well, so you guys can consume that. It's very, 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 very powerful book, as well as her content. Molly, again, I really appreciate you being on here and sharing your experience and expertise in this market, in the industry. And Molly, I always love to ask my guests, before I let you go fully, is there any last words of wisdom they'd like to share with our audience?
Thank you, Christian, for the opportunity. No, just be courageous. I think everyone, part of your audience, if they're listening to you, they're already successful. But just to kind of summarize what we talked today, practice humility so you can have future success and really be able to take care of everything that's important to you, your family, your business, and know that it's okay that you don't know everything, and find those right people in your life that'll help you think outside the box. that you can feel confident and comfortable with and vulnerable with.
Well said. Well said. Humility. I love that. I love that. Guys, that is my friend, the CEO of Dynasty Family Office, the one and only Molly Grubb. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, be uncommon.